Taylor Pomaski loved summer nights. On April 25, 2021, the 29-year-old software platform engineer decided to host a casual get-together at her split-level home in Spring, an unincorporated suburb of northwest Houston. Friends arrived with six-packs and Bluetooth speakers, drifting between the kitchen and a backyard fire pit while Taylor fussed over the playlist: Texas country, a splash of 2000s R&B. Her on-again, off-again boyfriend, former NFL tight end Kevin Ware Jr., cut a quieter profile that evening, nursing vodka sodas and scrolling his phone. Guests would later remember tension, whispered arguments on the patio, Taylor's smile hitching each time Ware brushed past. Still, by midnight the party thinned to embers, and everyone assumed the couple had carried their friction indoors. 48 hours later, Taylor failed to return calls from her mother, stepfather, and best friend. At work, a Zoom square remained blank. Slack pings went unanswered. When her dog, Max, wandered the neighborhood unleashed, a habit Taylor detested, concerns spiked to alarm. On April 27, relatives filed a missing person report with Harris County Sheriff's Office, HCSO. Deputies performed a welfare check and found the house empty, dishes still in the sink, strands of blonde hair clinging to a bathroom vanity, as though someone had left mid-routine and never came back. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Kevin Ware. The 6'3" former Washington and San Francisco tight end had a history of volatility. 2 weeks earlier, he'd been stopped for speeding. Deputies recovered a loaded AK-47, a 9mm pistol, 24 grams of cocaine, and 8 grams of meth from his Dodge Charger. Released on bond, Ware awaited trial on felony drug and gun counts when Taylor vanished. Questioned by detectives, he claimed Taylor stormed out after an argument, climbed into a stranger's car, and took off. His demeanor, flat, arms crossed, eyes flicking toward the door, did little to reassure family. The timeline grew darker when neighbors handed over ring footage. At 1:47 a.m. the night of the party, Ware's pickup backed into Taylor's driveway. A tarp-covered mound rested in the bed. The truck idled 9 minutes before pulling away toward Higdon Road, a sparsely lit stretch edging Big Cypress Creek. Cellular data later showed his phone pinging towers near a construction site at 2:16 a.m., then going dark for nearly 4 hours. HCSO, constrained by procedural requirements, could not arrest Ware for murder without a body. They did, however, revoke his bond on the gun and drug case, citing community safety. On June 11, 2021, U.S. Marshals arrested him outside a strip mall gym. In court, he appeared in shackles, a surgical mask hiding most of the scowl but not the defiance in his voice when he called the proceedings a witch hunt. The judge denied bond. Ware was remanded to the Montgomery County Jail to await federal sentencing, an ironic twist that removed him from the streets but delayed murder case progress for months. Taylor's family refused to let the case cool. They organized search parties in the humid Texas summer, scouring drainage ditches, culverts, and overgrown pipeline easements. Volunteers wore purple, the color of domestic violence awareness, and carried laminated photos of Taylor beaming in a turquoise sundress. Social media pages titled "Help Find Taylor Pomaski" amplified tips: a burned patch of grass in a vacant lot, a foul smell near a culvert, a rumor of screams heard the night she vanished. Each lead ended in heartbreak. Then, 8 months after the party, a surveying crew contracted to clear brush along a Harris County drainage easement stumbled upon human remains: a skull, charred rib fragments, and sections of femur buried beneath construction debris. Forensic anthropologists spent weeks sifting the scene. On April 29, 2022, dental records confirmed what the family had feared: Taylor Pomaski had been found. The medical examiner cited homicidal violence, evidence of stab wounds, blunt force trauma, strangulation, and post-mortem burning. With the body, prosecutors moved swiftly. In July 2022, a Harris County grand jury indicted Kevin Ware on charges of murder and tampering with evidence, human corpse. The indictment alleged Ware cut, struck, and strangled Taylor, then attempted to destroy her body by fire. Penalties ranged up to life imprisonment. Ware maintained a stony silence through pretrial hearings, even as prosecutors introduced chilling details: witness statements of Ware dragging an unconscious Taylor down a hallway, testimony that he doused clothing in bleach hours after she disappeared, Google searches from his phone for "best way to burn evidence" and "lie decomposition speed." Defense attorneys suggested the state had circumstantial fog and floated alternative suspect theories that fizzled under scrutiny. As jury selection loomed in May 2025, Ware faced a crossroads. Conviction at trial could bring life without parole. Prosecutors offered 30 years if he pled guilty to murder and tampering. On May 6, 2025, Ware accepted. In hushed courtroom tones, he admitted responsibility for Taylor's death. The plea mandated that his 30-year sentence run concurrently with the 15-year federal term he was already serving for firearms and narcotics. For Taylor's mother, Delana, the admission arrived as bittersweet relief. It's not justice we celebrate, only accountability. At sentencing, prosecutors revealed Ware's final unreleased cell phone video, a shaky clip, timer timestamped 2:41 a.m., showing embers glowing in a ditch as Ware's reflection loomed in the lens. He flicks gasoline from a red can, sparks a lighter, and whispers, "Goodbye, trouble." Gasps filled the courtroom. Ware stared at the floor, shackled hands trembling. Judge Hazel Jones addressed him. "You stole a daughter, a sister, a friend. You tried to erase her from earth. Instead, you have etched her name in every mother's nightmare. The next 3 decades, perhaps the rest of your natural life, you will reckon with that flame." She imposed the agreed-upon sentence and ordered Ware to pay restitution for funeral costs and counseling services for Taylor's family. Outside, Delana spoke beneath a gray sky. "No term will heal us, but maybe it keeps another woman safe. Taylor's light still shines." Purple Ribbon supporters released violet balloons that drifted above the courthouse, vanishing into cloud cover, symbols of a life extinguished but not forgotten. Kevin Ware grew up in North Houston's Acres Homes neighborhood, the son of a gospel choir soprano and a city bus mechanic who believed football could chart their boy a path beyond cracked sidewalks and pawnshop neon. By 12, he was already 6 feet tall, outrunning older kids on dusty vacant lots. Coaches at Klein Oak High School saw Sunday-sized potential. Sure-handed tight end, gliding strides, a wingspan built for end-zone fades. Recruiters swarmed. Ware signed with the University of Washington in 2001, dazzling early before multiple knee tweaks and a sophomore suspension for violating team rules sent his draft stock sliding. Still, raw tools earned him undrafted free agent calls. He landed first with Washington, then bounced to San Francisco. 28 receptions over 3 seasons, 1 memorable Thanksgiving touchdown, and a lingering frustration that his body recovered slower than his temper cooled. Off the field, Ware's confidence swerved into arrogance. Bar fights, noise complaints, unpaid traffic tickets stacked in glove compartments. After tearing his ACL a second time, he drifted through short-lived gigs. Youth camp coach, supplements rep, nightclub promoter. NFL checks gone, he leaned on aura, swagger that scored VIP booths and convinced acquaintances he was 1 call away from a training camp return. Privately, he raged at a league he felt had discarded him, numbing the sting with Grey Goose and later lines of coke cut with crushed Adderall. Taylor Pomaski's trajectory traced a gentler arc. Born in Atlantic City, she moved to Houston at 12 when her stepfather transferred with an energy services firm. She unfolded into adolescence like a sunflower, varsity cheer captain, honor society tutor, the kind of friend who mailed handwritten notes just because. After graduating from the University of Texas at Arlington with a degree in information systems, she landed a remote job troubleshooting software for an Austin-based startup. Coworkers joked she was their culture department, throwing virtual trivia nights during COVID lockdowns and sending DoorDash meals to teammates who tested positive. In June 2020, pandemic isolation drove Taylor to accept a friend's invite to a socially distanced backyard barbecue. There, beneath string lights and cicada hum, stood Kevin Ware, now 39, still broad-shouldered, recounting NFL locker room pranks with magnetic ease. Taylor, then 28 and newly single, found the stories intoxicating. Ware, drawn to her easy laughter, promised to teach her route-running tricks. They exchanged numbers. Early months sparkled. Sunrise jogs in Memorial Park, homemade pasta nights, Ware driving 2 hours to surprise her with Astros tickets. Photos show Taylor perched on his shoulders, arms outstretched like goalposts, grin wattage blinding. But fissures emerged. Ware's jealousy flared if she lingered on Zoom happy hours. He snooped her Instagram DMs, insisting male colleagues had ulterior motives. Taylor's inner circle noticed bruises, small but enough to spawn whispers. She brushed them off. "We were play wrestling, he's just clumsy." Once, after a neighbor overheard shouting and called police, Taylor declined to press charges, telling officers it was only yelling. By late 2020, Ware's finances pinched tighter. High-interest loans funded a Dodge Charger Hellcat he showcased on social media. Drug dealing, prosecutors later alleged, supplemented income. Taylor covered utilities when his payments lapsed, eager to prop the relationship until he found something steady. She reassured friends, he's starting a training camp for kids. He's closed on a real estate license. Yet hidden texts to a cousin revealed exhaustion. I love him, but I'm scared of his moods. New Year's Eve 2020 crystallized the pattern. At a small gathering, Ware accused Taylor of flirting with a former coworker. Witnesses say he shoved her into a patio door, glass shattering. Taylor fled barefoot, hid in a neighbor's bathroom for an hour. Ware later apologized with roses and a handwritten letter pledging therapy. She returned. March 2021 brought legal trouble that should have been the breaking point. The traffic stop yielding 2 firearms and a stash of cocaine and meth. Ware called Taylor from jail, voice cracking, begging her to bond him out. She did, wiring $23,000 from savings. In texts, she confided to a friend, "If I don't help him now, he'll spiral." She installed a Life 360 tracker on their phones, telling herself location sharing equaled safety. The April 25 party was meant as a reset. Grill smoke, good vibes, friends to buffer potential arguments. Early evenings sailed smoothly. Ware even played cornhole with Taylor's college buddies. But as moonlight deepened, alcohol mixed with latent resentment. Ware accused Taylor of laughing too hard at another man's jokes, storming inside. Guests overheard muffled fighting, a crash, then Taylor re-emerging with forced cheer. Around midnight, most friends departed, uneasy but unaware of the storm brewing once the door closed. What precisely unfolded between 12:30 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. would be pieced together later from blood spatter, phone pings, and confessing lips during plea negotiations. Investigators believe Ware confronted Taylor in the bedroom, fists first, then a kitchen knife when she tried to flee. A neighbor reported hearing a scream cut short. Blood droplets in the hallway mapped her desperate crawl. Ware's 6'3", 260-pound frame overwhelmed resistance. He strangled her until unconscious, stabbed post-mortem to make sure, then wrapped the body in a comforter and plastic tarp. Ring footage captured his truck backing in. He hefted the bundle into the bed, drove to a friend's abandoned construction lot near Big Cypress Creek. There, under cloud-cloaked stars, he attempted incineration with gasoline and scrap lumber, but panic and haste meant incomplete combustion. He shoveled soot-blackened bones into a shallow ditch, covered them with rubble, believing Texas rain and time would finish the erasure. He returned home, scrubbed walls with bleach, stuffed bloodied linens in contractor bags, and at 4:50 a.m. texted himself a reminder, "Dump trash site too." Taylor's phone he smashed, tossing fragments into a storm drain. Days turned into weeks. Ware told detectives varying stories. Taylor ran off with drug dealers, Taylor flew to California, Taylor was on a spiritual cleanse. He posted cryptic Instagram quotes about betrayal. Meanwhile, Taylor's family plastered flyers, pleading on local news, "We just want her home." Ware rarely joined searches, citing legal advice. In December 2021, federal prosecutors secured a 10-year sentence for Ware on gun and drug charges, later enhanced to 15 after evidence he'd lied about firearm ownership. Behind bars, he boasted to cellmates of knowing how to get rid of problems. One inmate flipped, sharing conversations with investigators that filled gaps, references to bleach, to a pit near the creek, and to that damn girl's dog still yapping next door. The informant directed deputies to the drainage easement, eventually yielding Taylor's remains. The forensic narrative presented during plea discussions was airtight. DNA on the tarp, phone GPS aligning with ring timestamps, microscopic blood in Ware's truck matched to Taylor, charred clothing fibers identical to her missing dress. Faced with a tsunami of evidence and the risk of life imprisonment, Ware folded. As news of the 30-year plea broke, Houston's domestic violence advocates seized the moment, pushing for greater funding of survivor shelters. They cited Taylor's case as emblematic: successful woman, supportive network, yet cycles of manipulation silencing cries for help. Harris County allocated $2 million to expand crisis beds, a legislative ripple born from one extinguished life. Behind prison walls, Ware begins each dawn in a 6x9 cell, concrete echoing his footsteps. No crowds, no Friday night lights, only the drum of accountability. Taylor's loved ones start theirs with memorial hashtags and purple bracelets, reading, "Love shouldn't hurt."
They host self-defense workshops, channeling grief into guidance so others might spot red flags sooner. Harris County allocated $2 million to expand crisis beds, a legislative ripple born from one extinguished life. Behind prison walls, Ware begins each dawn in a 6x9 cell, concrete echoing his footsteps. No crowds, no Friday night lights, only the drum of accountability. Taylor's loved ones start theirs with memorial hashtags and purple bracelets, reading, "Love shouldn't hurt." They host self-defense workshops, channeling grief into guidance so others might spot red flags sooner.
When spring sunlight filters onto the vacant lot where Taylor's remains were found, bluebonnets now bloom, planted by volunteers who cleared rubble, tilled soil, and scattered seeds in her honor. Wind rustles petals like whispered apologies from a city too late to save her, but determined to remember. Bluebonnets weren't the only things taking root in the wake of Taylor Pomaski's murder. Her case sharpened conversations about intimate partner violence in Houston's booming suburbs, places where new cul-de-sacs spring up faster than social service networks can expand. Harris County had already seen a 32% rise in domestic violence homicides during the COVID lockdown period. Taylor's story, amplified by sports media fascination with her NFL-connected killer, pushed the issue into nightly newscasts and state house hearings. Advocates seized the spotlight to expose systemic gaps. One glaring flaw, the wellness check limbo. Ware's April 2019 threat incident produced no formal protective order, leaving no entry in Texas's protective order database, so his later gun purchase and bond release encountered no red flags. In legislative committees, sheriffs admitted such calls sat in a gray zone, serious enough for officer concern, but not prosecutable enough to generate paper that bars firearms. A bipartisan bill, HB 2743, now requires law enforcement agencies to file a threat encounter report whenever weapons are seized during a mental health call. The report automatically triggers a 12-month hold on any future firearm transfers to the individuals involved unless a judge lifts it after a hearing. Nicknamed Taylor's Data Law, it cleared the Texas House 121-18 and awaits a Senate vote. Meanwhile, county judges piloted Swift Shield, a docket-side tool that pulls 911 domestic disturbance histories, protective order databases, and pending criminal charges into a single view at bond hearings. In the program's first 6 months, judges flagged 53 defendants for no-contact orders that might otherwise have slipped through. One was a former high school coach arrested for stalking an ex-girlfriend. Police later found unregistered handguns in his truck. He's now detained without bond, a preventative ripple from Taylor's tragedy. Grassroots efforts amplified legal reform. Taylor's best friend Amber Seeley launched Project Violet, a nonprofit pairing domestic violence survivors with volunteer tech mentors to wipe abusers' spyware from phones and set up secure cloud backups of evidence, screenshots, threatening voicemails, injury photos. The program's first workshop at a Houston public library drew 40 women and 2 men, each left with a 32-gig encrypted thumb drive labeled My Receipts. Houston police have already accepted 3 Project Violet drives as evidence in felony assault cases. In prison, Kevin Ware exists under a strict regimen that belies his former celebrity. He wakes at 4:30 a.m. to a buzzer, shuffles to count, eats powdered eggs, and returns to his cell to push-ups and self-loathing. Fellow inmates call him wide receiver, a jab at his drop from tight end glory. He has no television, disciplinary sanction for mouthing off to a guard, and limited commissary. Letters arrive from a dwindling circle. An old high school buddy who sends Bible verses, a former agent angling for rights to a cautionary documentary, and occasionally Ware's teenage son from a previous relationship, writing, "Why did you hurt that lady?" Ware's replies are heavily redacted. Prison mailroom censors strike passages that could re-traumatize victims or reveal gang affiliations. His latest job assignment is welding railings for wheelchair ramps, a small irony for a man once paid to entertain millions with his physical prowess. Psychologists monitor him under the prison's intimate partner offender track. So far, Ware declines group therapy, branding it soft. But Texas prisons have leverage. Inmates who refuse programming can lose good time credits. Ware's earliest release eligibility, after factoring state and concurrent federal sentences, falls in 2050 when he'll be 70. Good conduct could shave that to 2042. Participation in therapy could shave a bit more. Resistance keeps the door shut. Ware's decision remains pending, but counselors note incremental shifts. He now keeps a journal instead of punching cinderblock walls. For Taylor's family, activism tempers grief.
Delana speaks at high school assemblies with slides of Taylor beaming beside her dog Max. She asks seniors to pull out phones and add the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Nearly everyone does, thumbs tapping silently while the gym echoes. Dion, Taylor's stepfather, lobbies county commissioners for more funding of the lethality assessment program used by patrol officers. The tool, a 13-question checklist, predicts a victim's homicide risk. Data show that when officers administer it and connect high-risk victims to advocates on the scene, repeat assaults cut by half. Commissioners approved a budget line to add 500 tablets so every patrol unit can run the assessment.
Corporate Houston has joined the cause. Energy giant ConocoPhillips sponsors Run for Taylor, a $10K raising funds for the scholarship named in her honor. The inaugural race snakes along Buffalo Bayou Park, bibs tinted violet, and timing chips tracked by the same Life 360 technology Taylor once downloaded hoping to feel safer. 6,000 runners register. Drone footage captures a river of purple crossing Memorial Bridge at sunrise, a living tribute to perseverance. At the state level, Taylor's case helped push an expansion of electronic monitoring mandates. Judges now must consider, in felony domestic violence cases, continuous GPS ankle monitoring for defendants on bond, technology that alerts victims when their abusers breach a 2,000-foot buffer zone. Critics warn ankle monitors are costly and sometimes unreliable in rural coverage gaps. Supporters counter that even imperfect warnings can buy life-saving minutes. The measure passed with a rider granting low-income counties access to a state-run monitoring center, funded partly by seized criminal asset forfeitures. Media coverage has evolved too. Local newsrooms adopted ethical guidelines to replace sensational mugshots with context, hotline numbers, survivor resources, policy updates. The Houston Chronicle's Deep Dive podcast, Vanished in Spring, devoted 6 episodes to Taylor's life and the systemic failures that led to her death. Instead of grim audio reenactments, producers interviewed software engineers she mentored, the waitress who served them dinner that final night, and the neighbor who dialed 911 weeks before the murder but saw no follow-through. Listeners raised $150,000 for the Resilience Fund, providing emergency relocation grants to women fleeing high-risk partners. Nationally, the NFL faced renewed scrutiny over retired players involved in intimate partner violence. An ESPN Outside the Lines segment tallied 24 former players arrested for domestic abuse homicides since 2000. Critics pressed the league and NFLPA on mental health support for retirees with CTE concerns. In response, the union expanded its neurocognitive benefit program, offering annual mental health screenings and anger management counseling to former players. Participation voluntary, but linked to eligibility for certain pension accelerators. Whether Ware's crime pushes other retirees toward help remains unmeasured, but the option now exists. The Bluebonnet lot where Taylor's remains were found is transforming again. Local artist Maya Trevino proposed a memorial garden shaped like a labyrinth, a walking path representing the convoluted escape routes survivors navigate. County commissioners approved, volunteers laid gravel curves, and landscapers planted lavender for calm, rosemary for remembrance. At the center stands a stainless steel sculpture, a phoenix rising from stylized flames, wings etched with the names of Houston's domestic violence homicide victims from the past decade, Taylor's among them. Visitors leave notes. "Your story saved me. I finally left. I'm still here." The garden hosts twilight vigils each April 25th, the anniversary of her disappearance. Purple candles flicker beside solar-lit pathways, and the air smells of rosemary crushed under careful feet. Someone always brings Max, now grayer around the muzzle, wagging at the crowd, living proof that love survived the violence his owner could not. Kevin Ware will never walk that labyrinth. His footprints, once traced in NFL end zones, now circle a concrete yard. But every step taken in the garden, every hotline saved, every law amended, underscores a reality he can't erase. Taylor Pomaski's light outshines the bonfire meant to hide her. And while Ware's 30-year sentence counts down grain by grain, the reforms seeded in her name continue to grow. Bluebonnet bold, roots deep enough to crack the pavement of silence wherever it still lies. Legislation and memorial gardens touched public life, but real change settled into quieter corners. Hospital intake rooms, HR manuals, social media timelines where friends checked on one another with new urgency. Memorial bracelets, purple silicone stamped "Love Shouldn't Hurt" became as common as Astros caps at Houston grocery stores. Cashiers asked the meaning. Customers repeated Taylor's story, spreading awareness transaction by transaction. One tangible shift appeared at Houston Methodist and Memorial Hermann emergency departments. Inspired by Taylor's case, nursing leadership instituted the Silent Signal program, a postcard with a violet bar that every patient receives regardless of complaint. One side lists domestic violence resources, the other asks in discreet code whether home feels safe. Patients fold the card to show only the violet bar if they need help. Within 6 months, ERs logged a 27% spike in disclosures. People previously reluctant to mention bruises explained falls, but the card's wordless prompt opened a door. Social workers now monitor drop boxes where folded cards land, springboarding private intervention. Corporate culture evolved in parallel.
Tech startup Vantalogic, where Taylor once troubleshot software bugs, launched Pomaski protocols, an internal policy granting domestic violence survivors 10 days paid leave for court dates, relocation, or recovery. The HR toolkit includes stipend guidelines for emergency housing and instructions to discreetly redirect paychecks to new accounts. Other Houston firms adopted similar measures, citing recruitment appeal and moral duty. Statewide, advocacy groups push for legislation making such policies mandatory for companies with over 50 employees. Education systems responded too. The Klein Independent School District, Kevin Ware's alma mater, integrated relationship violence curriculum into high school health classes. Sophomores now learn to spot gaslighting, digital stalking, and financial control. Role-play scenarios draw from anonymized details of Taylor's life. A partner monitoring texts, isolating friends, blaming alcohol. Teachers report students stay after class to ask how to help friends or themselves long before danger escalates. Counselors compile referrals, and in at least one documented case, police intervened early to remove firearms from a volatile household. Meanwhile, investigators revisited Ware's earlier red flags, searching for threads that might tie him to unsolved disappearances along I-45, the fabled Texas killing fields corridor. DNA swabs entered CODIS, but no hits surfaced. Still, Detective Luis Martinez told media, "Even negative results matter. They remind the public we keep checking." The review prompted Harris County Cold Case to digitize decades of evidence, speeding future cross-checks. Taylor's digital legacy also found purpose. Her Instagram, once private, became a curated memorial run by her mother. Posts alternate between travel memories, Taylor atop enchanted rock, swaying on a Belize hammock, and infographics on restraining orders, red flag laws, trauma therapy. Followers climbed from 200 friends to over 30,000 strangers who comment daily. Leaving tonight, thank you for the courage. Your light reached Ohio. Meta, acknowledging the page's public service value, verified the account, boosting reach. On university campuses, criminology departments adopted the Ware case for coursework in offender profiling. Students analyze his online footprint, lyrics hinting at violence, forum posts idolizing toxic masculinity. Professors challenge them to draft intervention points. What algorithms could flag? What community resources could react? A capstone group at the University of Houston built a machine learning model detecting escalation in social media posts. The project won state innovation grants and is being piloted by the Texas Attorney General's Cybercrime Unit. Not all repercussions were solemn. Annual Taylor Fest sprang up at a local brewery, blending music, art, and self-defense demos. Friends book bands Taylor loved, indie folk, pop-punk throwbacks, and between sets, instructors teach quick wrist releases and knee strikes. Food truck vendors donate portions of sales to the Resilience Fund. The vibe is defiant celebration, living the life Taylor was robbed of. When dusk falls, festival-goers hold phone flashlights aloft as a singer covers fire and rain, lyrics drifting over clinking pint glasses and soft conversation about recovery. In policy chambers, opposition lingers. Gun rights advocates argue Taylor's data law sets dangerous precedent. Wellness calls could brand innocent citizens, blocking Second Amendment rights without due process. Lawsuits contending the statute's vagueness will likely reach Texas's high court next year. Proponents counter with statistics. 118 firearm purchases delayed since implementation. 29 of those applicants later served with protection orders. Potential tragedies paused long enough for courts to intervene. The legal fight promises to test how Texas balances individual rights with communal safety in the domestic violence arena. Inside prison, Ware grudgingly entered mandated therapy to preserve slim hopes for future privileges.
Group sessions force him to listen as other offenders map abuse cycles. Facilitators challenge him to identify his own. At first, he mocked exercises, but journals reveal cracks. Why did I need to control her every move? Fellow inmates report he sits longer at the bulletin board reading letters from survivors to offenders, an initiative called Voices Beyond Bars. Rehabilitation experts caution against quick redemption narratives, yet any hint of reflection stands in stark contrast to his earlier bravado. Future parole boards will weigh such progress, but Taylor's family prepares to contest any early release motion. They attend victim impact workshops to craft statements that balance anger with constructive plea, aiming to persuade decision-makers decades down the line that Ware's freedom risks public safety. They also gather messages from community members saved by Taylor-sparked reforms, weaving generational impact into their argument. Outside corrections, the case has altered media language. Crime reporters now routinely note both the homicide and the prevention resources, mirroring suicide coverage guidelines. The Associated Press released updated domestic violence-style tips. Avoid victim blaming, include hotline numbers, clarify that leaving abusive partners is high risk. Taylor Pomaski's name appears in the foreword as catalyst.
As year 5 approaches, Delana and Dion plan a road trip tracing Taylor's favorite childhood stops: Galveston Boardwalk, San Antonio Riverwalk, Hill Country Wineries. They'll film vignettes for the Memorial Instagram, showing grieving can coexist with joy. The journey ends at the Labyrinth Garden, where they'll place a stone painted sea blue, Taylor's happiest shade, beside hundreds left by visitors worldwide. At dusk, garden lights flicker on automatically. Wind chimes crafted from recycled cymbals tinkle, echoing love of music that first drew Taylor to that fatal backyard party. Nearby, a new motion-activated lamppost, funded by Project Violet, illuminates the path, symbolic and literal safety light. Each gust persuades bluebonnets to sway, and though the flowers will fade with Texas heat, their seeds lie waiting to bloom again, perennial, resilient, unstoppable. So too is the legacy she never chose, but now owns, a clarion call that even in a city of oil rigs and football fever, the quiet horror of intimate partner violence cannot stay hidden. Not while Taylor Pomaski's name turns laws into shields and sorrow into tide-turning momentum. Taylor's impact kept spreading in concentric circles, but change is fragile, and every new initiative faced pushback, funding hurdles, or the entropy of public attention. By 2028, 3 years after Ware's plea, media cycles had shifted to newer tragedies. Advocates feared the momentum might fade, so they strategized to institutionalize advances before memories dulled. First priority, sustaining the Resilience Fund. Early donations from Taylor Fest and corporate partners covered counseling and relocation grants, yet demand outpaced revenue. To stabilize cash flow, organizers lobbied the Harris County Commissioner's Court to allocate a portion of offender asset forfeiture proceeds, money seized from drug busts and illegal gambling, to domestic violence services. Opponents argued forfeiture funds should bolster police budgets. Supporters countered that prevention was policing. After heated debate, commissioners approved a 15% diversion. The change funneled an extra $800,000 per year into survivor programs, enough to hire bilingual advocates and extend services to rural precincts where options had been scarce. Meanwhile, Taylor's data law faced its first serious courtroom test. A gun rights group funded by national donors sued, claiming the statute's automatic 1-year firearm hold after weapon seizure wellness calls violated due process protections. The case, Mercer v. Harris County, reached the Texas Supreme Court. State attorneys defended the law by presenting data: 42 blocked gun purchases tied to defendants who later accrued protective orders, 0 false positives leading to permanent denial, and an appellate process available within 2 weeks if individuals contested the hold. In a 6-3 ruling, the court upheld the statute, citing the compelling state interest in preventing predictable bloodshed. The majority opinion referenced Taylor's murder 3 times, calling it a preventable horror underscoring legislative necessity. Schools continued evolving curricula. A University of Houston evaluation showed students who completed the relationship violence module were 60% more likely to correctly identify coercive control behaviors. Graduates of the first cohort entered college and, when asked in surveys, credited the unit with helping friends leave unsafe situations. National education conferences invited Klein ISD counselors to share their framework.
By 2030, 7 Texas districts had adopted similar courses, and the State Board of Education weighed integrating components into statewide standards. Corporate policy diffused more slowly but steadily. When a Houston Chronicle investigation highlighted inconsistencies, some companies offered generous leave, others none. State legislators proposed the Safe Workplace Act, mandating 5 days paid domestic violence leave for firms with over 50 employees. Lobbyists for the Texas Association of Business claimed it imposed hidden costs. Survivors testified that missing a week's wages could trap victims with abusers. Negotiations produced a compromise: 3 mandatory paid days, 2 optional unpaid, with a tax credit offsetting wages for small businesses. The bill passed, making Texas only the 7th state to codify such leave. While policy matured, technology caught up. The university machine learning model that flagged escalation in social media posts entered a pilot with the Texas Department of Public Safety's Fusion Center. Partner platforms, after Cambridge Analytica scars, were wary of data sharing, but a memorandum allowed anonymous pattern analysis without collecting personal identifiers, unless threats met a threshold for imminent danger. In its first year, the system issued 124 alerts. 19 escalated to law enforcement outreach, resulting in 7 protective orders and 2 arrests before violence occurred. Civil liberties groups monitored the program, but initial audits showed strict adherence to privacy safeguards. Taylor Fest grew into a city-sanctioned event, drawing touring acts and generating tourism revenue. Net proceeds funded the garden's upkeep and Project Violet expansions. Taylor Fest grew into a city-sanctioned event, drawing touring acts and generating tourism revenue. Net proceeds funded the garden's upkeep and Project Violet expansions.
One festival innovation was the silent market, booths where survivors anonymously sell crafts, with QR codes routing payments through a nonprofit shell so abusers cannot track income. The market empowered dozens of women to build savings, a critical step in leaving abusive homes. Inside Ware's prison, incremental reform flickered. After 2 years of therapy, he agreed to participate in the Victim Offender Dialogue program, but Taylor's family declined. They felt no need to share space with the killer. Still, the offer, required by program rules, documented Ware's first explicit admission of remorse beyond courtroom scripts. In journal entries reviewed by psychologists, Ware wrote about recurring dreams of fire and bluebonnets, symbols entwined with guilt. Therapists remain cautious, noting true accountability must extend beyond words. Parole eligibility hovered on the horizon. Though Ware's earliest possible release date is decades away, Texas mandates preparatory hearings every 3 years. Taylor's family organized a ready roster of supporters who will submit impact statements each cycle. They created form letters, editable personal anecdotes, and an email reminder system so the parole board receives a steady volume advocating denial. Survivors of other cases requested templates, turning Taylor's campaign into a statewide parole protest network, ensuring violent offenders faced community memory when seeking freedom. Media portrayals entered a reflective phase. A Netflix docuseries, In the Shadow of the Stadium, dedicated an episode to Taylor. Producers collaborated with Delana to avoid sensationalism, focusing instead on systemic failures and reforms. Viewership spiked and hotline calls surged 22% the week of release, evidence that responsibly told stories save lives. Yet fatigue lurked. Volunteers burned out. Donations dipped when economic downturn hit. Organizers innovated with micro-donation drives, $5 monthly pledges auto-drafted like streaming subscriptions. They gamified giving with milestones. 500 donors unlocked an extra self-defense workshop. 1,000 funded a therapy dog program. Retention climbed, suggesting small, budget-friendly contributions sustain long-term advocacy. Through it all, the Labyrinth Garden remained a barometer of community pulse. Each April, fresh stones appeared, inscribed in languages from Spanish to Vietnamese, a testament to the universal reach of Taylor's story. On the garden's 5th anniversary, a holographic installation debuted at dusk, projected silhouettes of bluebonnets swaying among real ones, programmed to respond to visitor footsteps. Children chased digital petals, their laughter blending with wind chimes. For a moment, grief and joy coexisted seamlessly. In the legal realm, national impact emerged. The federal reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in 2027 included a pilot inspired by Texas, a $25 million grant for states to develop threat encounter reporting databases akin to Taylor's data law. Advocates hailed it as a bridge between wellness checks and court protections, closing the gap that claimed Taylor's life. By 2031, when Houston hosted the NCAA Final Four,
Organizers partnered with Project Violet to distribute safety cards at fan zones, purple, wallet-sized bilingual resources tracing back to Taylor's silent signal program. Tens of thousands of visitors left with hotline numbers tucked beside ticket stubs. Even small rituals carried forward. At the end of each run for Taylor, finishers ring a ship's bell once for every year she lived, 29 chimes. Runners say the sound feels like sending her name across water, echoing beyond stadium lights. And so the story continues, not in headlines but in incremental safeguards, policy language, and the muscle memory of a community that learned complacency can be lethal. Taylor Pomaski's physical voice was silenced on a spring night, yet her echo instructs Texans on how to listen differently, to screams cut short, to quiet manipulations behind closed doors, to opportunities for intervention before another comforter becomes a shroud. In that echo, progress finds its rhythm, step by determined step, long after the bluebonnets wilt and bloom again. Years pass, and Taylor Pomaski's influence becomes woven so tightly into Houston's civic fabric that people cite her reforms without always recalling the name that sparked them. A new generation of firefighters trains under protocols altered by her story. Body cams activate automatically on domestic disturbance calls, creating instant records that can transform he said, she said into evidence. Police academies teach recruits to treat every wellness check involving threats as a potential precursor to homicide, drilling them to catalog weapons and file the threat encounter report before they log off shift. Officers jokingly call it TPS, Taylor Pomaski Standard, a reminder never to leave blanks in the system. The Labyrinth Garden hosts more than mourners now. School field trips stop for lessons on empathy and civic action. Children trace paths of crushed granite, reading plaques about legislation, technology, and grassroots movements born from tragedy.
Teachers guide discussions. How does one person's story reshape laws? What responsibilities do bystanders hold? Somewhere between the rosemary and lavender beds, middle schoolers decide to start a peer support club, creating yet another ripple. By 2035, a statewide report shows domestic violence homicides in Texas down 18% from their 2020 peak, progress attributed to a trifecta: threat encounter reporting, expanded survivor leave, and early warning tech. Correlation isn't causation, analysts caution, but numbers put weight behind the reforms. Harris County's rate falls even faster, a 24% drop, credited to the Resilience Fund's relocation grants. Courts cite the program when issuing orders, acknowledging that protective paperwork means little if victims cannot afford to move. Technology continues to refine prevention without slipping into surveillance overreach. Version 3.0 of the DPS escalation detection algorithm now factors in message tone, image analysis, and sudden silence when a usually vocal social media user goes dark after a series of distress signals. The model sends anonymized flags to local hotlines rather than police, reducing false positive law enforcement interventions and empowering advocates to reach out gently. Civil liberties audits confirm minimal data retention, satisfying even skeptical watchdog groups. Corporate culture keeps evolving. Energy giants face investor pressure to demonstrate social responsibility. Offering robust domestic violence policies becomes a line item in ESG reports. The SEC's Human Capital Disclosure Rule requires public companies to describe workforce safety programs, and Pomaski protocol language appears in footnotes across industries. HR conferences host panels about survivor-centric benefits, and mid-level managers, once wary of personal issues, routinely ask employees, "Do you have everything you need to feel safe?" Higher education builds pipelines for survivor advocates. University of Houston launches a dual degree program in social work and cybersecurity, training specialists to combat digital abuse, stalking apps, revenge porn, financial sabotage. The inaugural class chooses the phoenix, emblem from Taylor's garden sculpture, as its cohort symbol, stitching it onto graduation stoles. Yet vigilance remains necessary. In 2037, a high-profile corporate executive in Dallas is arrested for murdering his partner. The media cycle reopens wounds, but also affirms the infrastructure built since 2021. Police respond to earlier threats quickly because the threat encounter report triggered the firearm hold. Colleagues had domestic violence leave in their handbook and knew where to guide the victim, though ultimately she stayed. Advocates stress that systems mitigate risk but cannot guarantee outcomes. They use the case to push for continual funding, noting reforms are fragile vines that can wither without care. Back inside prison walls, Kevin Ware ages. Knee surgeries from football and prison yard fights leave him reliant on a cane.
He finally completes the 18-month Batterer's Intervention Curriculum, a prerequisite for any remote possibility of parole review decades down the line. In a final assignment, he writes an accountability letter addressed to the community. It reads, in part, "My selfishness, my rage, and my cowardice removed a light this world needed. I was given talent and used it to harm. I cannot undo my crime, but I can refuse to lie about it any longer." The letter remains sealed. Taylor's family chooses not to read it. Their feeling no longer hinges on his contrition, which arrives too cheap, too late. Parole hearings begin automatically in 2042, but the robust protest network floods the board with statements. Teachers who use Taylor's curriculum, nurses seeing silent signal cards save lives, festival goers who found confidence through self-defense, parents whose daughters call the hotline Taylor's Instagram shared. The board denies release with a unanimous vote. They will reconvene in another 3 years, aware the same tide of community memory will return. Taylor Fest expands into a weekend conference, music at night, daytime panels on policy, technology, trauma care. Out-of-state delegations attend to replicate Texas's model. Feminist scholars call it the Pomaski Loop, grassroots activism that evolves into policy, then institutional memory, and finally cultural shift. Economist papers calculate the downstream savings, reduced emergency room visits, lower policing costs, workplace productivity gains. The intangible dividends, a child spared lifelong trauma, a talented employee who thrives, defy metrics but fill anecdotal reports. Even the NFL, late to self-reflection, contributes. Faced with mounting cases of retired player violence, the league invests in mandatory exit counseling for every player leaving the roster. Counselors flag high-risk individuals for ongoing support, connecting them to anger management clinicians and financial advisors. In 2032, an alum publicly credits the program with preventing a relapse. When audiences question the league's sincerity, commissioners cite the Pomaski case as catalyst, acknowledging past negligence and pledging sustained vigilance. Whether the pledge endures is a test for future seasons, but the acknowledgement marks cultural shift.
On the 15th anniversary of Taylor's disappearance, Houston City Hall hosts a commemorative lighting. Skyscrapers glow violet. The mayor reads a proclamation. April 25 becomes Taylor Pomaski Day, dedicated to honoring victims of intimate partner violence and recognizing the first responders, advocates, and lawmakers fighting every day to break the cycle. Public transit screens display hotline numbers all week. Local journalists run retrospective spreads, charting progress and reminding readers that behind each statistic lies a life with dreams as vivid as Taylor's spicy margarita nights and macrame wall hangings. Delana and Dion, older now, stand before a crowd too large to count. Delana's voice trembles. "We prayed her name wouldn't fade, but we never imagined it could guide so many." Dion adds, "People tell us they left dangerous homes because of Taylor. That's victory." They ring the festival bell 29 times, and after the last reverberation, silence blankets the crowd, an intentional pause, recognizing both loss and triumph. Then music swells, and fireworks, silent color-changing drones, paint the sky in violet, teal, and gold. Bluebonnets still bloom each spring, but the lot where Taylor's remains were found is now a small community center, free counseling rooms, a gym for self-defense classes, a courtyard for survivor art therapy. The entrance sign reads Phoenix House. Beneath, in smaller letters, founded in memory of Taylor Tamron Pomaski to ensure no cry for help goes unanswered. Visitors often lean against the labyrinth railing, watching newcomers choose paths. Footsteps crunch gravel, echoing through rosemary scent. Those who knew Taylor say her laugh sometimes seems to ride the wind, especially near sunset, when light slants golden and the chimes catch a gentle breeze, reminding all that from ashes, resilience can soar, lighting corridors of safety for strangers she will never meet, yet whose lives will carry her flame forward. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more true crime cases that deserve to be heard. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.